With the release of the second generation Tamron 28-75mm f2.8, does this really mean that the old version is not worth your time? Well, in this video, we're hopefully going to find out.
Come on.
The upgrades made to the G2 version of this lens design are fairly minimal, but still significant. The weight and build materials are largely the same, and they both have a dust and weather sealed construction. However, just like most of the Kardashians, the new Tamron has had a pretty convincing facelift, and along with it a few handy additions, including a customizable AF lock button and a USB port on the side. With this USB port, you can connect the lens to your computer and then use Tamron's included software to customize a whole bunch of things on this lens to really make it tailored to your shooting style. As for price, the newer G2 version is obviously going to be a little bit more expensive than the old one, but there's really not that much separating these two lenses, especially when you purchase them brand new off Amazon. So when it comes to awarding points for price, I'm actually going to give both options a point here, as they're both really good value for money. In terms of build, again, both lenses deserve a point here, as they're both very solid in the hand, though for handling, the newer G2 version has to win the point, just mainly because of its crazy amount of customizable options. When it comes to autofocus, in good lighting conditions, both lenses are rapid to focus with no signs of hunting. In low light conditions, both lenses took a little while longer to lock onto focus, so one thing in particular that struck our attention was that the new lens seemed to occasionally struggle to lock on focus, and it would just rack in and out ever so slightly before finally deciding to lock on, though the old lens in comparison didn't seem to have that issue at all. When shooting wide open at f2.8 in continuous burst mode, the overwhelming majority of the images we took with both of these lenses were sharp and in focus. The only images that were ever so marginally out of focus were those that were taken of George as he got closer to the camera. Now, despite the G2 having a slight hiccup in super low light conditions, I don't honestly think this was that much of a problem to deny a point entirely, so I am going to be fairly forgiving here and give both lenses a point apiece in this round. When shooting a moving target in video mode, both of the lenses managed to keep locked onto George as he walked towards the camera at a regular pace. When repeating the test but at a faster pace, both lenses continue to provide a flawless performance. As for AF noise, both lenses are incredibly quiet. Now, if you happen to use manual focus quite a lot, then the newer lens is by far the better option to go for, mainly because you can customize the performance of the manual focus dial by using Tamron's included utility software. The old lens in comparison, well, you're pretty much stuck with how it performs coming straight out of the box, and to put it mildly, it's pretty frustrating to use. It has a very subtle but noticeable delay and a non-linear feel to it, and this means when conducting even the most basic of focus pulls, it does take a lot of getting used to. On a positive note, there's not a huge amount of focus breathing with either of these lenses, though when placing the footage side by side, I did notice that the G2 offers a slight improvement over the older model. So at the end of this round of testing, both lenses deserve a point apiece for their impressive AF performance in video mode. In our Bugables test, both lenses offer nice round orbs across the majority of the frame, and it's only when you get to the far corners of the image that it appears as if the orbs have been cut in half for some reason. If I was being super picky, I would say that the old zoom does have a bit more of a noticeable onion ring effect when compared to the new lens, but it really isn't anything that drastic. When it comes to general bokeh quality though, the new lens provides noticeably softer and less textured bokeh when compared to the older model. So when handing out points, for me, the new G2 lens has to win this point here, as it creates much more pleasing bokeh. These lenses provide a similar amount of protection against flaring, with only a subtle amount of ghosting and artifacting displayed in our test footage. Though both lenses do come with lens hoods included in the box should you want to shade the front element in harsh lighting conditions. On a longitudinal chromatic aberration test, both lenses displayed green fringing at the top, with amber fringing below the area of sharp focus. Now, when it comes to capturing real life images, you really can't go all that far wrong with either of these lenses. They both felt really nicely balanced on the front of my Sony a7 Mark III, and I was really happy with the results that I came away with. Now, although the zoom range for this kind of lens is usually 24 to 70mm, Tamron have obviously opted for a slightly longer range spanning from 28 to 75mm. Now, this was done in order to help keep the size and weight of the zoom down. Personally, this really doesn't bother me too much because I usually find myself shooting with the long end of the zoom for portraits anyway, as it gives the most flattering results. However, for landscape photographers who prefer working with the wide end of the zoom, they might find that 28mm isn't quite wide enough. In terms of image quality though, it's incredibly tough to tell from these test results which is the sharpest option. When taking a look at the lens chart results, we can see that when shooting at f2.8 at the 28mm end of the zoom, both lenses are about on par in terms of sharpness at the center. At the corners though, the newer G2 provides a noticeable increase in image quality, which might be good news for landscape photographers. At the 75mm end, the G2 is now marginally sharper than the older lens, both at the center and also at the corners. If you're a fan of shooting up close to your subject, then both of these lenses are really good options as they both have a very short minimum focusing distance at the wide end and the long ends of the zoom. At the 28mm end, the sharpness and contrast is pretty much the same between these two lenses. However, at the 75mm end, we can see a noticeable increase in sharpness and contrast on the newer G2 version. So after looking at the test results, it's clear that the newer G2 version is the better performer when it comes to image quality, and so it picks up the final winning point. So probably somewhat unsurprisingly, the updated G2 lens wins this head-to-head battle as it offers a clear improvement in terms of handling, bokeh and image quality. However, this certainly doesn't mean that the old version of this lens is now a complete write-off. In fact, once this lens is eventually phased out by Tamron, which is probably going to happen in the next couple of months, it's likely that you'll be able to pick up a copy of this lens for super cheap on eBay, in which case it is still a fantastic option for anyone shopping on a really tight budget.